Hey guys, thanks for coming back to check out another video. Did you miss that? I think some of you did miss that. So we are here today to do an eyeshadow palette collection video. I am super excited. This is probably my favorite aspect of makeup. It is my favorite thing to watch. Anything eyeshadow palette content. And I want to like sit up straight. This is like a side note, but I feel like the camera cuts off the top of my head, so I feel the need to like lean in close like I got a secret to tell you. Anyway, eyeshadow palette collection video time. I just want to quickly say this is not a declutter. If you were looking for that, then click out of this video because I am not decluttering any palettes. If you caught my eyeshadow tracking like kind of introduction video, then you'll know that my plan is this year to keep track of all of the eyeshadow palettes that I lay my paws on this year, and then like the last 3 months of the year spend time with those palettes that I use 10 or less times and see if I need to declutter anything if something just isn't working for me at that point. So I would also like to say I did film the like actual palette portion of the video earlier, and I think the unedited footage is like an hour and a half long, so we're gonna see how long this is together. I don't even know right now. But I'm not splitting this video up into 2 sections like some people would do. I'm just going to release it all as is. So if it ends up being an hour long, then sorry, it's an hour long. But I will, in the description box for you guys, leave like those chapters so you can like skip ahead to what you want. You know, you could pause it, come back, like keep track of where you were much easier. So I know that how I filmed it was I started with like my drugstore palettes, and then I went and did like high-end / indie brand palettes. So I will try to break everything down like brand by brand, and then that way also if you're not interested in a certain brand, you can just skip on right past that. I think that's all the housekeeping things that I wanted to mention. Yeah, if not, I will leave. If there's any questions that you have, just check the description box. I've been trying to be really good about like filling those out with a lot of information for you for your disposal or at your disposal, whatever. I'm just gonna do a fade and we will get into the actual collection. Okay, so I started filming this and then I realized like, oh, I think the ring light is turned up a little too bright and it's kind of washing out some of the shadows. So you might see like some glaring on the packaging. That's, you know, we're working with what we can do here. I'm still on a night shift life and I don't have the benefit of like natural lighting. So the only other thing I want to point out, I am just sitting on the floor in a sea of palettes, and I just thought instead of you looking at my lap, I would put this blanket down to kind of give like a nice background. But I guess by telling you, I have totally ruined the effect that I was going for, like the illusion. That's okay, we're all friends here. So let's get on into this. We're going to start with drugstore eyeshadow palettes, I believe. And I am going to go brand by brand with drugstore and like high-end indie palettes. But yeah, I think we will start with BH Cosmetics. They have quickly become like my favorite drugstore brand. I think I have the most palettes from BH Cosmetics, if I'm being honest with myself. So the first one I'll show you is this big guy. I think this is one of my biggest palettes. I do have another large palette that we'll get to, but this is the Lit List palette that they came out with for holiday 2021. This one spoke to me way more than their holiday palette for 2020. I really liked the color story of this. I don't know if it's like, I really like the idea of this neutral row and then these more like colorful rows. I liked the fact that, well, I wish there were no pressed glitters in these, but I like the fact that there was only one pressed glitter, this red shade, whereas in last year's palette they had 2 pressed glitters. So I really have enjoyed this. I love coming into this. I feel like the looks within this are endless, and even though it's kind of like your standard kind of basic shades, let's say, because you've got the neutrals, and then we all have greens and reds and silvers and blues and stuff in our collection, but having them all together in one palette really brings me out of my comfort zone and makes me put together colors that I wouldn't necessarily have put together otherwise. So yeah, I really am happy to have this one. I'm going to try to not say in this video like, oh, I really love this palette, or I'm happy to have it. Like, if I wasn't happy to have it, I probably wouldn't have kept it in my collection, you know? Okay, so then the next thing from BH Cosmetics, they did in 2021 do a series of birthstone palettes. So on the first of the month for each month of the year. They released birthstone palettes. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, there was a part of me that wanted to pick up all 12 of them, but I limited myself to picking up 4. And kind of the reason I went with the 4 that I did go with is I see these as standalone palettes and companion palettes, but I also thought that the amethyst and the sapphire would go really well together, and then that the emerald and the citrine would go really well together. But let's get into it and open these up. They do have a mirror, so I'm going to try not to blind you with it. But this is the amethyst for February one. I really love the commitment that they did to a more purple toned eyeshadow palette. Like, this one is one of the more monochromatic ones in my opinion, and I know on camera it might look more pinky to you guys, but these mattes in here, these 3, they do lean more on like the purple side of things. This one and this one more of like a cool tone purple, and then this one is more of like a purpley brown kind of shade. So I have really enjoyed this palette. All of these palettes do come with a pressed glitter as well, so I kind of only see this palette as a 6-pan palette. But then the idea of this, just in case you're unaware, this like larger shade was the birthstone shade, and then these other 6 shades are shades that like complement it. I really liked the idea behind this. I know some people weren't like a fan of that, but I thought this was like a more like well thought out, because I know they did those small like zodiac palettes, and I didn't think that those were as well thought out as these ones were. So then also I had to pick up the emerald one for May. I'm a May baby, and I was so happy that they went with like a green color story for this. I think this is so pretty. Now, I probably have most of these shades throughout my collection, I'm not gonna lie to you, especially like this more khaki green shade, but this one just blends out so beautifully. Like, I really enjoy the formula of these of this darker shade that they have. And then these 2 green shades, this emerald one and this one down here, I know like on camera they might look pretty similar, but in person this is much more of an obviously like emerald shade, and then this one's much more of like a foresty green shade. And I feel like within my collection I have a lot of like light green shimmers, but not a lot of these types of green shimmers. So I was happy to pick this up and like add it into my collection, and I've had a lot of fun playing with that one. And then we have the sapphire for September. This one was probably one of the like darkest palettes that they did. Maybe this, and then like the garnet for January palette had like a black and some darker reds in it, but this one is like more of like a cool tone darker palette. So this one I have done like one full-on look with just using this palette, and it was pretty, but it wasn't my favorite. I really like to do a more like gradient effect within my crease, so I do find that I need to pair this with something else in order to like have that lighter matte shade in my crease and then go in with one of these other darker mattes. So I have paired this a lot with the amethyst palette and gotten a lot of use out of it that way. This palette, while this is still a pressed glitter here, this is the only pressed glitter that I have like contemplated maybe putting on my eyes. It's really pretty. I hope that you can kind of see it in the camera. It's one of those like more sheer based glitters, and then it's got like just this assortment of color like purple, green, pink, blue. It's almost like confetti in here, and it just looks really pretty. And then the last birthstone palette that I have is Citrine for November. So this one is like perfect for fall. I just really love these yellow and red, like brownish red tones together. This is the best performing matte yellow that I think I have from the drugstore. So I'm super excited to like have this, and I love that these brown colors are more on the like yellow mustardy side of brown. Like, they're not chocolatey brown. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I have greatly enjoyed this palette as well, and have done some really fun looks pairing this with the emerald palette. So then we're not done with BH Cosmetics. From their Say It collection, I did end up getting 2 of their palettes. So I have the Do Not Disturb and the Looking Like a Snack. You have to say it that way, in my opinion, for it to count. So these also have mirrors in them. I'm going to try to not blind anyone with mirrors, but this is the Do Not Disturb palette. This one is really pretty. I love the mix of like berries and blues. I even like the more pastel kind of blues. I'm not like the biggest pastel fan, but I have found that like using the pastel shades to blend out the darker matte shades has been really helpful. So I just feel like an all pastel look kind of makes me personally look sickly. So I don't tend to go for like an all pastel look, but I really love this like darker plummy purple up here. And then some of these shimmer shades are really interesting. And I like having the berries and the blues like all together in one palette. And then we will talk about the looking like a snack. So this is probably one of the only palettes that I have a little bit of buyer's remorse with, and it's nothing against the formula, it's nothing against like the color story, really nothing like that. Like, this is still a really nice palette. However, when I saw this online, I thought it was going to be a bit different, but then when I got it in person, I really feel like I have a lot of these shades represented in another palette, the Festival by Juvia's Place. If you're familiar with that palette, then you can probably see that comparison too. The Festival has like the peachy shade, it has like the more like hot pink shade, it has a really nice matte red. So I don't know how much I actually like needed this palette, but I'm still happy that it's like here. I'm going to use it and, you know, continue to play around with it and create a lot of fun looks with it. Okay, so then the last stack of BH Cosmetics that I have, and then we will be on to the next brand, is like their brunch and travel series palettes that come in like this square packaging. So the first one is the Blueberry Muffin, which has a mirror. So the background of him is pretty holographic and reflective. It might be a little bit hard to show off on camera. I absolutely love this. This is the palette that really got me into blue eyeshadow. I see this not like as a blue palette. I see this as like a neutral palette that allows you to really play and incorporate blues quite nicely. So like this whole row here is more like neutral shades, and these browns up here are a little bit deceiving. They just look like brown eyeshadows in the pan, but once you use them, like especially this lighter one, they come off much more like a plummy purple kind of brown, and so they're really fun to like play and mix with the other shades in this palette, and I have really enjoyed it. So my blue eyeshadow palette collection has kind of exploded, like you'll see, and I blame it all on this guy. Alright, so then continuing on with the theme of the brunch series, I do have the Avocado Toast palette as well, and open him up, he looks like this. Now this is a replacement palette. I had this palette and I think it got, did it get like disrupted in translation, in moving? I can't remember. When we've moved so many times in the year of 2021, I feel like, and I had palettes that broke along the way. Unfortunately, I thought I packed them really well, but if you're moving, pro tip, and you think you packed your eyeshadows pretty well, you didn't. Go back and pack them like super well. But yeah, so this is a replacement palette for me, but I absolutely love the green grunginess of this, and I'm sorry for that background. It does make it hard to show off, but this has some of my most favorite like green shimmers within it. This Haas shade is one of my favorites. It's just like this really great grungy dark olive green, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of this, especially like in the spring and fall. All right, so then we do have the Lost in Los Angeles palette. I actually owned this, and then I think I sent this to a friend. She has like a lighter complexion, and she has these really pretty intense like baby blue kind of eyes. So I thought this kind of pastel color story would pop better on her. And then my mom made a BH Cosmetics order for me for Christmas, and she picked this palette up because she was like, it's so colorful and pretty, like I think you'll really like it. So even though it was something that I had decluttered, I was thankful to like receive it as a gift from my mom, and I am quite happy to have it back because like I said before, while I don't see myself doing full on like pastel looks because I feel like they make me look sickly, I feel like this is going to be a great companion palette to pull out and to help blend out those really dark, intense, like matte colors. And then I can really see myself coming into here and dipping into the shimmers, because the shimmers in here are really quite nice, and they don't, like, they're lighter, but they're not like pastel shimmers, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do enjoy this one as well. I have the Party in Puerto Rico. So this one really gives me Natasha Denona. I don't remember if it was Sunset or Sunrise palette vibes,
But the one that has like the really like kind of magenta pinks in it and like the yellows, and I think there's an orange. Either way, I really liked the idea of this color story. I think this is going to get a lot of use out of me in the summertime, especially getting to dip into like these orange shades. There's quite a few like orange mattes and then some like more orangey shimmers down here. So I'm really excited to pull that one out. And then I have another tried and true favorite. This is the Passion in Paris. I picked this up on a whim and I'm really happy that I did. This is so pretty. It has a lot of these like really nice like red shades, but they're not bright, vibrant red. They're more like, I don't know, maybe muted and cool toned is a good way to describe them, but they work really nicely with this whole palette and I have just really enjoyed this. Again, this is one of those palettes where I think that the color story is super inspiring. And like I said before, BH Cosmetics makes probably my favorite like drugstore palette formula. So then the last palette I have from them to show you is the Smitten in Switzerland. So you'll probably notice they did like a update to their packaging, like the covers. So I have seen some people say that this palette is discontinued. I don't think it is. I think they updated it to like more of this kind of packaging, and then they had at the end of the year like a huge like inventory blowout sale, so that's probably why you're not seeing it on their website if you were looking for it. But yeah, I don't think it's been discontinued. Now these older style packagings like this came with a mirror, whereas these new ones don't. I like that they don't come with a mirror in the new ones, to be honest. I am not the person who uses the mirror from my palette to do my makeup, but here's the Smitten in Switzerland color story. I really enjoy this too. Again, I said I wasn't gonna say that the whole time, but here we are. I feel like this has a nice mix of like icy cool tones and some like warmer greens, and like this pop of orange is really fun. I think, yeah, most of these like travel series palettes, at least for me, really kind of make me think about different color combinations than I normally would. So I do enjoy this one as well. All right, so then next we will talk about this guy. I count this in with my drugstore palettes, even though this is from Beauty Bakerie. So this is the I'm with the Cookie Baking Crew palette. I know that you probably can't read it and the ring light is super reflective on this, but this was a palette that they did exclusively with Target. So they came out with, I think, another one that was called like the Sweet Potato Pie, which was like a more orangey warm tone palette. And then I think they have like 3 or 4 other like staple, more like not going anywhere palettes with Target. So I did pick up this one. I know you can't see it, but there is a shimmer shade here. It's just a white shimmer shade, so it's like hard for the camera to register that. I like this palette, but the formula for with the mattes and the shimmers in this palette is a bit more on the drier side than like what I personally go for. Not to say that it's bad. It doesn't like perform terribly, but I do find that I have to work like a little bit harder to blend out these mattes, and then I definitely have to make sure that I have like put down like some type of sticky base to get these shimmers to pop. So I'm just going to keep playing around with this palette this year and, you know, see how I feel about it come the end of the year. But I do like that they put, for a holiday palette, like I think this was a very interesting release, because I feel like typically we see like greens and golds or like reds and silvers or some combination of those four shades together, whereas they went with like a red, blue, gray, brown color scheme. I just feel like it was interesting for the holidays. So yeah, I'm going to keep playing around with this one. All right, so we're going to move on into ColourPop. So the first one that I will show you is the On Cloud Blue palette. These also, I don't like the plastic packaging. I wish they would have done cardboard for all of these palettes, because I have such a hard time opening them. And then I had a shade fly out. Hold on momentarily. We're having some technical difficulties. Okay, got that fixed. So here is the On Cloud Blue. This one is much more of like a pastel blue themed palette, But they had like a sale at the end of the year. I told you guys, if I saw it and I wanted it in 2021, especially the last half of the year, I just picked it up. There's a lot of retail therapy. But anyway, they were having a sale, and so I got this one to pair with the Blue Moon palette. But I actually have enjoyed this, even though this is more on like the pastel side. I feel like this palette still goes from really light to really dark, and I can come to this and create just a standalone look with it. So I have enjoyed this one. And then the next one we will talk about is the Blue Moon palette from them. Let me struggle to open. Oh, this one opened up much more like easily than the other one. So this is Blue Moon. I think you can tell they are like sister palettes. This one is just darker and doesn't really have, well, I won't say any, because this shade does remind me of like a pastel blue, and then this one is like a lighter like sky blue. So out of the two, I don't think I really have a favorite, because I do use them together more often than not, but I am glad to like play around with them. I've really come to like fall in love with blue eyeshadow. I didn't think I would ever say that in my life. Then again from ColourPop, I have the Sonic Bloom palette. I think this was a fall release that they did. I don't know if this was an Ulta exclusive. I'm going to bring it in some. The background is super reflective. I like this palette a lot more than I thought I would, especially for this shade right here. This is like an interesting kind of like blue purple shifty shade. I get a lot of enjoyment out of using this as a lid shade, and then I really like this green and like this more like golden orange. The only shimmer shade that I really haven't used or played around with, just because it's not like a shimmer shade that I'm like super drawn to, is this darker pink. I like pink mattes, but like dark pink shimmers I'm not really a fan of. Like I'll play around with it more like the more I pull out this palette. But yeah, that's what Sonic Bloom looks like. And then, so I have a cousin that lives here in my city that we moved to, and she is a self-proclaimed makeup hoarder. So we did a makeup swap, and she had the ColourPop Good Sport palette in her like basket, like go through this, see if you want anything. So I decided to take this home because this is like a unicorn, I feel like, in the makeup world. Like I feel like so many people rave about this palette, and there's so many people that feel like they missed out on it. So I wanted to like take it and like try it and experience it for myself. So it is a really nice like color story. It's ColourPop's like tried and true really nice formula. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if people just hyped it up too much. So it's not that I don't like it, but it's just I don't know what the fuss was about, if that makes sense. I don't know. This matte yellow in here is a little bit underperforming, and so I do like the BH Cosmetics matte yellow better. But some of these shades are really interesting, especially these like kind of gray green shades. So I feel like I will get a lot more use out of this in the fall, and then really like be able to come on here and tell you if I feel like we all did miss out on this palette. Alright, so then in that same ColourPop order where I picked up the Blue Moon and the On Cloud 9, I did get the Lush Life palette. Why does ColourPop have to make all of their backgrounds so reflective? I feel like I gotta hold it like this so that the camera can kind of have a chance. I love the like, well, here, this is how I'm gonna explain it. I think that this outside packaging perfectly represents exactly what you're getting in this palette. So I like it when brands do that. I'm not typically a packaging type person, but it is nice to kind of know what you're getting into. I also love that you have these two matte shades here, and then you have corresponding like shimmer shades with them. So I feel like you can get some really easy like two and done shadow looks out of this. But yeah, and then these like oranges here too, I guess. You have like the matte and the shimmer. So I feel like that's fun. I feel like the pop of blue in this palette really works because this blue shade is going to play nicely with some of these other like shades that are in here. I'm bringing that up because another palette that I have from ColourPop has that pop of blue effect, and I don't think it works in that palette. And I'm over the pop of blue effect. So then I also have the ColourPop Sailor Moon Pretty Guardian palette. I am not sure when this one released. I did not pick mine up right away like with the initial launch. Like I waited a little bit. But this palette is so pretty for like spring. I feel like This has been a lot of fun to use. I've also been dipping into it like right now this month for these two shades over here. This like purple shade is one of those like kind of icy lavender shades, and it's been super pretty to pair with like some other dark intense matte colors and really brighten things up. So yeah, happy to keep playing around with this one. So then we come to Limoncello. Now this is the palette where I was talking about. It has the pop of blue effect that I don't think works with the palette. So if you cover it up, I know it's just a basic, boring, neutral palette, and then, oh, pop of blue, like it's so fun now. But this blue to me doesn't go with like the rest of the palette. Like if you use this blue with this yellow, you're gonna get green. If you use this blue with any of these like more matte neutral colors, you just get a muddy mess. So while it's a nice blue, like it works nicely, it blends out nicely, I don't like it in this palette. But I did get a lot of use. I think this came out in summer of 2021 and I picked it up and I got a lot of use out of it in the summer. I think this is probably one of my favorite, like top favorite neutral eyeshadow palettes. This yellow like buttercuppy shimmer is so pretty, and then this like light, this one is like a olive green kind of shimmer, but it's lighter than like some of those other olive green shimmers that I have. So yeah, excited to like play around with this one more. Sorry if I like blinded you with the mirror just then. All right, so the last ColourPop palette that I have is the Lust for Dusk palette. I feel like this one was fun. I'm happy that they came out with this. I feel like we are in a season of like warm tone palettes. So when a cool tone palette comes out, it really catches my eye. And especially from ColourPop, I feel like all they do is more warm tone palettes. They have had cool tone palettes in the past, but it's been a while. Like the one that comes to mind is the Fame palette, was their last like straight on cool tone palette. I guess they had the chili, no, what was it? The Stony Fox? The Stone Cold Fox? I don't remember. That palette was just way too large and repetitive for my taste. So I picked this one up, is what I should just come out and tell you. I have really enjoyed this. I love this like gray shade, like putting this in my crease, deepening it up with like, deepening it up with like this blue gray, putting this like purpley gray in the outer corner, and then going in with this shade on my lids has been really pretty. This is one of those like shifty shades. It's like a kind of like a gray blue shift. I really do enjoy that. And then these other shimmer shades are nice. This one kind of looks like a pressed glitter, but for like, as far as my knowledge goes, it is not a pressed glitter. It does not feel like one. It's just one of those more like flaky shimmer shades. So that rounds off ColourPop. All right, so the last drugstore brand that I have is Juvia's Place, and I think I have a lot of, well, I know I have a lot of Juvia's Place. I think I have more BH Cosmetics, but Juvia's Place is probably like runner up. So I do have 3 of their Rebel quads that they came out with. There is one that I didn't want. It's the, I don't know what it's called, but it's like the gray themed one. So I'm going to open these up for you. So this is the Honey Rebel quad. This is what this one looks like. These orange shades are super pretty. I really like having like this lighter kind of almost more mustard one, and then this one. Again, like the gradient effect like I was talking about, like I will go in with this first and then use this one and then deepen up with this one. It's really nice. This is the only quad in this collection that they came out with that just has one shimmer shade right here. And it's a little bit too dark and bronzy for my personal liking, so I tend to dip into other shades, but that's okay. And then we have the Mints one. I love pairing the Mints one with the Army one that I'll show you, and then I like pairing the Army one with the Honey one as well. So I get the most use out of the Army one. But here's what the Mints one looks like. It is these 2 shimmers on top and then these 2 mattes on the bottom. What am I trying to say? Using these 2 like more pastel minty shades paired with like the darker greens in this Army quad have been a lot of fun. So I really have enjoyed playing around with these. I do see these quads more as like little companion palettes. So then the last one is the Army one, and you will see this is like some dark forest green goodness, and it has been, like I said, a lot of fun to use these 2 darker mattes to like play with those more minty shades. This matte down here, I think in the camera comes across as like obviously they're both dark greens, but I think this one comes across as a darker green. But when you put it on your eye or like swatch it, it's almost like a black gray kind of shade, so I feel like it's a little bit misleading in the pan. But I feel like Juvia's Place did a really good job with the formula of these like little quads. I feel like these quads match up with what you expect to get out of their larger palettes. I'm bringing that up because I have 2 of these like 6-pan palettes from them, and I don't think the formula in these is the same as what you get in their bigger palettes, or like I said, within these like little quads. So the first one I have is the Blushed Rose 6-pan palette. I know they came out with like they had a whole collection, like the bronze palette, and then they had some bronzers, some blushes, and then this palette. So I don't know how I feel about this palette. On camera, it's going to look like it goes really deep, and this shade right here is actually a lot lighter on your eyes than you would expect. The matte shades in here just, they don't wow me. Like Juvia's Place mattes have always been on the more drier side in my opinion, but these are like even more dry and a little bit harder to work with, and the shimmers are also a little bit drier as well, and I don't feel like they're as poppy and vibrant as what I've come to expect from Juvia's Place shimmers. So I don't know if this palette will continue to like live in my collection. Again, this isn't like a declutter. I'm waiting the whole year to see what I play with and what I'm drawn to, but that's kind of where I'm at. I have tried to use each 3 of these like lighter pinky shades as blushes to see if I could get some use out of them that way, and they look really pretty when you first apply them, but then like within an hour I noticed like it looks like all my blush has like faded away, so I'm not going to continue to use them in that way. And then the other 6-pan eyeshadow palette that I have, this came from my cousin as well, the one who gave me the Good Sport palette. She got 2 of these sent to her when she only ordered 1. So this is the I Live, I Love Ice palette. And out of like all the blue palettes that I have and that I have shown you, this one is my least favorite. Again, much for some of the same reasons as the Blushed Rose palette. I just feel like the mattes are super dry as well as the shimmers. This one also has a pressed glitter in it, so this now becomes like a 5-pan palette in my opinion. And yeah, this shade down here, it looks, I don't know if you can tell on camera, but in person it's like this really interesting marbly type shade. But when you put it on, it honestly doesn't look any different than this like lighter, icy kind of white blue shimmer. So there's a lot more repetitiveness in this palette than some of my other monochromatic palettes. So again, I don't know how much use I'll be getting out of this one. Okay, so then we go into the Saharan. I know for sure this was one of the palettes that got busted in one of our moves. So this is a replacement palette. It's probably going to look like it's not been touched. I have used it once, I think, since replacing it. So I do really enjoy this palette. I enjoyed it before it broke, obviously, or I wouldn't have replaced it. My favorite shade up here is Kia. I absolutely love to do halo eyes. So make Kia like the inner and outer color, and then use the Wodabi shade on the center of my lids and just go in with like a more, either like a brown or like a reddish brown kind of crease. I feel like that makes for a really pretty eye look. And then I also, from my cousin, got the Warrior 3 palette. This was, I think she must have gotten like one of Juvia's Place's mystery boxes, and she had a lot of the palettes already, so she passed this one on to me. I have not yet dipped into the mattes of this palette, but I think they're really pretty and they're different. Like, I don't think this is a rainbow palette necessarily, but I feel like if you were to compare this to other rainbow palettes, the matte choice, like the matte shades that they chose to put in here are more of that like darker, almost like primary color-esque kind of vibe, if that makes sense. I have dipped in though into this blue shade, which has been really pretty. I know some people complain that there's only 2 shimmers and they're both blue. They look kind of the same on the eyes. I didn't really find that to be the case. Now, I haven't worn this one on my eyes, but I swatched both of them, and to me this is much more of like a Caribbean Ocean kind of blue, and then this one is much more of like a steely, like winter sky kind of blue. So I think this was an interesting choice. I am super curious to play around with this like steely blue shade and this darker purple. Okay, So then next up we have the Warrior palette. So this is the Urban Decay Naked Honey palette before Urban Decay Naked Honey came into existence, in my opinion. I think this is a really nice, just like dripping honey bronze palette that they did in a 9-pan formula. I feel like this is really pretty for the summertime is when I get the most looks out of this. Again, like the background's kind of reflective. I feel like if I hold it here, you can get a good look at it. I absolutely love this shimmer shade down here. It's like a really pretty, like taupey, bronzy shimmer. And then this shade up here is kind of like the lighter version of that. So fading those two into each other has been really fun. And then up next, we will talk about the Trab palette. Now this background is definitely reflective, so I am going to have to try to hold it still, maybe right there. So I do really enjoy this palette. I have pan in this lime green shade, and then I don't know if you can tell on camera, but I have pretty good dips in these two shades here. I love every shade in this palette. The only two shades that I don't really use is this red, kind of orangey red shimmer. Now there's nothing wrong with this shade. This is a pretty shade, but it's just not like the typical color that I want on my lids. The only dud shade in this palette is this dark, like tealy green shade. As far as like Juvia's Place shadows, like their mattes being super dry, this one is like the worst of the worst. It is dry and patchy and hard to blend out, and you'll blend and blend and blend, and then it kind of blends away into nothing, and so you have to pack on another layer, and then it's patchy all over again. So I just tend to not even fool with this shade when I dip into this palette. But much like with the Saharan palette, I really love this blue shade, and I love, again, doing a halo eye and doing this blue and with this interesting, I know it just kind of looks white in the pan to you, but it has like a intense limey green shift to it, so pairing these two together has been fun. And then I will sometimes put this bronzy shade on my lid and top it off with this shade like on top, and that really gives it this really pretty like green bronze kind of shift to it. Actually, I should probably try topping this shade off on this red shade and seeing if I like it that way. All right, so then up next is my baby. This would probably be my favorite Juvia's Place palette if I had to pick one. So this is the Festival palette. I feel like this is an underrated palette as far as like the Juvia's Place lineup goes, but this to me is probably the most interesting color story that they've ever came out with. This totally takes me out of like my comfort zone, makes me think of different color combinations. I absolutely love this palette. You can see I have pan on 3 of the shades in here. This like white icy shade makes for a really pretty inner corner highlight, but it's also a really pretty lid shade. So if you just want to go in with any one of these matte shades in here, well, maybe not this mustard one, I haven't tried that, but I've done just this red or just this pink or just this more like orange in my crease, like really smoked it out, like blew it out, and then just put this as my lid shade, and it looks so pretty. It's such a simple look. So yeah, I cannot rave enough about this particular palette. And then I have the Saharan 2 palette. I don't know if this one has been discontinued. I think there were some talks about discontinuing this palette, but I feel like Juvia's Place does that to us a lot, where they're like, nope, this one's gonna be gone, and then it goes away for a while and then it comes back. Like they did that with the Tribe sometime last year. Either way, I'm rambling. So I like this palette, but I really only come into it for these 6 shimmer shades. These matte shades I could take or leave. I feel like they don't come across on your eyes as the color in the pan. Like especially this center berry shade, it definitely is much more like magenta colored, at least in my opinion, when I put it on my eyes. And I feel like if I'm not careful, I can look a little bit sickly with it. But the shimmer shades in here are some of the most like interesting shimmer shades I think I have. So like this minty kind of green one, but it almost has like a gold shift to it, and then you've got this like peachy gold kind of duochrome shade, and then this one up here is very actually reminiscent to the Becca highlighter Vanilla Quartz, like that white base with like a gold shift. So yeah, I really like the shimmers in this palette much more than the mattes. And then I do have the Nubian 2 palette. Again, I think this is an unsung hero within their lineup for like really pretty jewel grungy tones. Now if you are not a fan of like dark looks, then stay away from this palette, because I have found that no matter what like color combination I go in with, my look always turns out to be on the darker side. I really enjoy that, but I know not everyone does. So I feel like this is another palette that I will get a lot of good use out of in the fall. Now let me just say, I am someone who thinks you can just wear whatever color you want. It doesn't matter for the season. But I do have like all of my palettes in my head have a season. So I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But yeah, I do like this for like the jewel tones. I feel like they're really pretty and intense. I know on camera this shade and this shade probably look very similar, but this is more of like an orangey gold, and then this one is more of like a traditional gold. So that is it for Juvia's place. Alright, so that wrapped up drugstore eyeshadow palettes. So we will move on into like what I classify as higher end / indie palettes, because indie palettes typically tend to be a little bit more on like the expensive side, so I group those together. But I just have this stack in front of me of like one-off palettes. Like these are brands that I only own one palette from. So I thought we would do these first, and then we would go more like into brands where I have multiple palettes. So the first one is the Urban Decay Naked Honey. No, this is the Naked Wild West. So I got this for Christmas, and this was not a palette that I like put on my Christmas wish list. So I wasn't expecting this, but this was quite a pleasant surprise in my opinion. Like, I really have enjoyed using this palette. I think this is, one, it's a better formula than what I remember the Naked palettes being. Like this and the Naked Honey I feel like are better formulas. And then I really enjoy that they went with the, like, they did go with the pop of blue effect, but it works in this palette. Like that deep dark blue matte shade really blends out nicely with some of those more like reddish tones, or like that very last shade is like a purple gray, and putting those two together is really pretty. And you do have like the blue shimmer shade to pair it with. I will say that like the top half of the palette, where it's like the lighter brown neutral side, a lot of that is repetitive, and I don't think we needed all of those shades in the palette. But overall, I am really happy with this one, and I think it's a great like little palette. I know some people complain that Urban Decay's shimmer formula is not that impactful, and I agree. It's not as impactful as like some other things, especially like indie brand shadows. But I always go in with my NYX glitter glue primer and then put the shimmer shade on top of that, and I never have a problem with it that way. Alright, so then the next palette we will talk about is my only ABH palette. So this is the ABH Jacket Anna palette. I absolutely love this, and you can see lots and lots of shiny pan in here. So this is absolutely one of my favorite fall time palettes, but this is also a great all year round palette. The current look that I've been loving to do has been going in with this ginger shade, and then deepening it with the pinker, going in and using Big Wig in my outer V, and then topping it off with any like shimmer shade, maybe not necessarily from this palette, but just any shimmer shade in general. And I know I did my like, let's look at all my eyeshadow pans video, and this palette was in there, and maybe you can tell already, but the Zam shade, I did end up hitting pan in that one too. I just used this palette one additional time. That was actually the lid shade that I used with those crease colors I just told you about, and I was able to hit pan in that shade. So that's another shadow from this palette with pan, and this palette looks very well loved. Alright, so then the next palette that I only have one of is from Nabla. So this is the Dreamy 2 palette. I used to own the Secret and the Side by Side palette. I didn't really like those from Nabla. I felt like the shimmer formula in those two palettes were like, it was flaky and kind of hard to work with, but the shimmer formula in this palette is not like that. So I have really enjoyed this, and I really like the color story of this. This is a very like wintry palette to me. I also like that these two shades down here, while they just look matte to you guys, they feel more like a cream to powder finish. And so at first they were a little bit hard to work with, but then once I figured out like a pressing in motion and then a blending out kind of thing, they became much more enjoyable. Especially this one, I know on camera it looks more of like a black shade, but in real life it's like a very dark, like chocolatey brown shade, and pairing this with this red has been a lot of fun. So I am glad that I held on to this palette. I wish Nabla would give us more palettes with this type of formula rather than that more like chunky shimmer formula. All right, so then I've heard a lot about Huda Beauty, but her bigger palettes that she comes out with never speak to me. Like, they're more on the pinky kind of side of things. And it's not that I don't love my pinky eyeshadows, but I don't want like a full-blown big pinky palette like that. So I've always wanted to try stuff from her, but just never had a palette that speak to me. And then the Wild Jaguar came out, and y'all, I think this is really pretty. I didn't hear very many people like talk about this palette, but I have gotten a lot of fun looks out of this. I really love this like gray purple shade. It's really pretty. Just doing this in your crease and then any of these lid shades would do like a really nice like simple two and done look. I do like the brown in here, and then it has a favorite standard Haley cream shade, so there we go with that. But yeah, it really was the shimmer shades that pulled me in to like pick up this palette, but I'm glad that I like tried it. I know some of her like smaller 9-pan palettes can have like a finicky formula or like a different formula than her bigger palettes. Again, I've never tried her bigger palettes, but as far as this one goes, I didn't feel like the formula was finicky. Like, I felt like it was really good and like a solid little 9-pan palette. Alright, so the next one, it's an indie palette. Is it the first? I can never remember what's indie and what's not, and I feel like some people, like, as soon as like a brand starts selling in Sephora or Ulta, they're like, oh, it's not indie anymore, but it still is, because indie just means that you're independently owned, like you don't have an umbrella company. That's a side tangent. This is the Give Me Glow Christmas Morning palette. I think I picked this up back in July of 2021 and have no regrets. This is the only Give Me Glow palette that speaks to me on another level. And I know it's a very basic palette, but it fits the theme of Christmas morning so nice. So really, it's the shimmer shades in here that drew me in. And these shimmer shades, y'all, are like foiled. Like, you put them on your eyes and it looks like you did that whole like wet brush technique. They are just so pretty. I will say the mattes, like their matte formula is more on like that drier side, like Juvia's Place, but not as badly. Like, I feel like it's easier to work with these mattes than the Juvia's Place ones. So yeah, I am really happy with this. I'm happy I got to try out the Give Me Glow formula. Like I said, none of their other palettes are really speaking to me right now, but it's a brand that I would like keep my eye on. Alright, so the next palette I will show you is from Violet Voss. This was a Christmas gift from my bestie, and I didn't even know this palette existed, which kudos to her for snagging something that I didn't even know existed. But I feel like this is Haley in a palette, is it not? I think this is so fun. I haven't yet, as I'm filming this, gotten to like sit down and play with it, but I'm super excited because this shade right here really reminds me of that sponsored shade from the ABH Jackie Aina palette, and that is one of my favorite shades in that palette. So I almost like have permission now to use up sponsored, you know, because I have this palette. But I really do like these shimmer shades, like the colors of them. This is just like a pretty like berry grungy green goodness color story. And yeah, I'm excited to pull this out and play with it and get use out of it. All right. The cats are destroying each other in the background, so hopefully you don't hear that too much. But this is my Persona Identity palette. I know that they have updated the packaging of this to that like plasticky, just plain basic packaging. And I kind of miss this. Like, I feel like the artwork on this made it much more like personal in a way. But I understand why they made the change. Like, you can tell like this more like white cardboard packaging does get beat up and pretty grubby looking. So if you don't like looking at grubby makeup, turn away, because this palette is used and abused. You can see I finished off a few shades in here. This Maverick shade is my current eyebrow shade, and I know it looks like it's done, but I do have the teensiest bit of product left in the corner there, and then I don't know what I'm going to do for my brows, but we'll figure that out on another day. I think this is one of my most favorite cool toned eyeshadow palettes. I feel like this was so well done, and the formula is super easy to work with. It's a more like tightly pressed formula. There's not a lot of powder kick up, so that's always nice to know. I feel like, because some people like don't like the more powdery kind of formula. So but yeah, I really do like this. I can't speak to like, did they update and change the formula with their new packaging? Like, I have no idea, but this like old school version I really do love, quite obviously. All right, we are getting to the end of this pile. This palette is upside down. So this is the collaboration between Betty Jean, or Butte Bean, or Batty Bean, or Batty Bean is her new name because it's on this palette. So this is the It's Freaking Bats palette. I just love the name of it. There's a mirror in here. This is what this palette looks like. I waited to order mine simply because I know Shroud is like a one-woman show, and I know there was like a little bit of chaos with the initial launch of this palette, so I waited to place my order. I placed my order at the beginning of December, and I actually didn't get my palette till like January 10th or so, but I understand it is a smaller production, but I'm really excited to have this. I have not yet gotten to play with this in my collection because I think I'm filming this on the 11th. So yeah, this palette like just arrived yesterday. But this is one of the most interesting color stories I have ever seen a brand or a collab or like an influencer type thing come out with. I think this makes so much sense for Betty Jean, in my opinion. And there's a cat walking by me. Kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, just overall, I'm really excited to try out Shroud's formula and play around with this. I feel like this is a palette where it might make your brain hurt a little bit to look at it, but it'll push you out of your comfort zone to play around with different things. All right, so then the last palette that I have in this like one-off palette thing, this was sweetly sent to me from Laura. So this is my only glam light palette, is the Cake palette. And I know some people are like, oh, this palette is like super big, and like, how do you store this? So it won't fit into my drawers that I have, but I just leave it like in my little palette thing on top of my desk, which is nice because then it gives me an excuse to pull this out and play with it as I want. So I am super thankful that Laura sent this to me, sent this my way. So this is like my only like traditional actual like rainbow palette that I have in my collection, and I don't think I need any other rainbow palette since I have this one. This is such a good formula. It is so pretty, so easy to work with. I really enjoy coming into this palette as like a companion palette, but also making just like standalone looks with it. I'm excited to like pair this with the Lost in Los Angeles palette and get a lot of good use out of both of them that way. I have to say some of my favorite shades are this like shimmer yellow and then this like matte yellow, and I absolutely love the red down here. I think on camera it's looking a bit more like plummy, but it's like a darker red shade. But yeah, just an all-around great palette. I would say the only thing that I would change personally is maybe kick out one of these blue shades and add in a shimmer kind of limey green, because this is just a matte lime green and it's the only green that's like in the palette. But overall, other than that, it's a really like nice palette. Okay, sitting on the floor cross-legged was a huge mistake on my part, so I had to like shift around. Sorry if like the blanket changed. But next we will do Lorac. So I have 3 Lorac palettes. You guys know my infatuation with Lorac. So the first one that I have is the Lorac Pro 4. I think my mom found this at like a TJ Maxx and she bought it for herself, and then she got it home and she was like, nope, I don't like this. So she passed it my way. I have always been a fan of the Lorac matte formula, and I've said it time and time again, their shimmer formula in these old style like pro palettes has always been on the more lackluster side. Like, you'll either have to spray your brush or use like some type of glitter glue with them. But I still really do enjoy their formula, and I like this like kind of fall leaning-esque color story. So I'm happy to like keep this palette kicking around. However, on that same vein of like their shimmer formula being lackluster, these new like updated pro palettes, they've kept their same great matte formula, but they have changed that shimmer formula. I feel like I'm stumbling over my words. You can tell I've been filming for a while. Anyway, they've changed the shimmer formula and like really updated it So now they're much more like punchy and like in your face. So this is the Pro Noir palette. If I didn't say, this is like their cool tone palette that they released. I think they had the Soleil palette, which was more of like a warm tone palette. Like this one reminds me of like, this is an updated Mega Pro 2, and then the Soleil palette is like an updated Mega Pro 1. So I really wanted the cool tone version. As you can see, I do have quite a few pans in here. This shadow has been finished off. This was like a cream shadow. I could stand to play around with more of this palette. Quite obviously, these darker shimmer shades down here have really went untouched and under like utilized within my collection. But other than that, like speaking to the rest of the palette, it has been a fun addition to have into my collection. And I feel like I like having these more kind of basic palettes, because then it's like, these are the palettes that I am drawn to and pull out when I'm like in a rush, or just kind of like I need to do, like I just need to put on makeup and get out the door, or I'm just like kind of uninspired and just want something simple and effortless. So I do like that. And then this is the Fairy Tale Forest. So I think this was their holiday release for this year, if I'm not mistaken, but I could very well be mistaken. So this is what this one looks like. I know this like section right here is getting a little bit washed out and looks a little bit samey, but these, so they are all like kind of gold shades, but this one's more of like a lighter white gold. This one's more of like a pale yellow gold. This is like a rose gold. And then this is like a darker yellow gold, just to kind of like give you an idea. So I have not played around with this palette as much as I have like the Pro Noir palette, but I think I'm gonna make this my new like go-to neutral palette for the reasons that I just said, and you know, play around with this one and see if I like it. But this one swatches the same as the Noir palette, so I'm sure that I will like all of the shades in here. I have done a few looks with this palette, and this like green shade is the shade that I tend to go for the most. I think you can tell like the disruption in the pan. So yeah, the other good thing about these new like Pro palettes that they have is that the pans are magnetic. So you can rearrange them if you want. You could combine the palettes if you wanted, put them with your singles. Like I think that's fun. I really like it when brands have magnetic pans. Alright, so then we will move on into Menagerie. I have two Menagerie palettes. I really think Menagerie always kills it with their packaging. Like, look how cute these little lions are. I just love it. The Lion King was my very first movie that I went and saw in theaters with my mom and dad when I was 5 years old. So, yeah, I have a soft spot for like lion things, I guess. But this is what this palette looks like. This is not an all matte palette, but close. There is this shimmer shade and then this shimmer shade down here, which are more dark bronzy shades. But I do really like this palette for like summer and fall. I like coming into this palette and using this to do like a lot of my crease work and then pulling different shimmer shades. So I think you can tell I have finished off a shade here. It was Antelope. That was actually a shade I was using in my eyebrows. And then I do have pan on two other shades within here. I find that the Menagerie formula is a little bit more on the powdery side, not as powdery as like ABH, but it will give you some like kick up, so just be careful when you're using it. I do my face makeup first though, and I just find that if I go in with a duo fiber brush that I am able to like wipe away any powder that has like fallen onto my face, and I don't really have any real issues. So then the other palette is the Whale Song palette, which is like their blue-green theme palette, and I really feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Menagerie was the first to do like this kind of blue-green themed palette. I know Tarte came out with like that joke palette one year that kind of blew up and bit them in the face, but either way, this is super pretty. I will say though, if this is a palette that has caught your eye, just be forewarned, this dark blue shade and this like darker green and then this kind of like gray blue green up here, these three shades I have found stain my eyes. I don't think that's the end of the world. Like, I'm fine. I go in and just cover it up with like concealer if I'm doing my makeup the next day, but I know some people that's a deterrent for them, so I just want to point that out. I don't find any staining issues with the Killer Purr palette, just in case you were curious. But yeah, I do enjoy this. I get a lot of use out of these two shimmer shades, surprisingly, but I need to like push myself to like do maybe a two and done look with like this kind of army green, and then this kind of this fluke shade is like a really pretty like kind of like a lighter Christmassy tree green, I guess is a good way to explain it. But yeah, I do like this palette. All right, so this next brand I am super excited to like show you. So this brand is called Sugar Drizzle. I think if you look them up online, it's Sugar Drizzle Polish. But they do like eyeshadow palettes and things like that. I am so excited because I was looking at their Facebook page. Y'all, this brand is from my hometown. Like, how cool is that? North Carolina girls supporting North Carolina girls. That's how I feel. So anyway, this is their multi-chrome cake palette that I can't open up. So this is a water activated palette that has all duochrome shadows. Now, you guys know me. I am going to hold that maybe back here so that you can see like the colors of it a bit better without it getting washed out. Either way, you guys know I don't do a lot of winged eyeliners or things like that. So you might be thinking to yourself like, well, Haley, why did you buy this? I really wanted this because this has, like I said, these are all duochrome shades and they're super pretty. And I feel like, and I've done it a few times with some of them, I feel like I can just, you know, spray my brush with some water or some setting spray, dip into these shades and put them on my lids and have like duochrome goodness on my eyeballs. So one of my favorites is to do this green, and I'm trying to get it to show, but I don't really think it'll pick up. This green goes from like green to blue to pink, and it's really interesting. And then this shade down here, to you guys it's green on the screen I think, but like to me it shifts to like a pinky red. So yeah, I've just had a lot of fun playing around with this palette and using this as a companion palette to make some other eyeshadow palettes that are like neutral or like not as fun, more fun. And then their actual palette that I picked up from them, this is their Frosty Flamingo palette. I had to keep the outer sleeve. I don't normally do that, but I had to. Look at how cute this little guy is with his Christmas hat. Oh, just love him. I don't know why I have to do that voice, but here we are. So this is a little 9-pan palette that they came out with for the holiday 2021, and this is so pretty. I absolutely love the pinks and the berries in here. I feel like this is a good like monochromatic, like smaller 9-pan palette, but I feel like I'm never going to get bored with this because all the different undertones that are in here. I don't know if it picks up for you guys, but like this purple right here is more on like the cool tone side, and then this like plummy purple and then this like pinky purple are more on the warm tone. So I really love it when palettes mesh together like cool and warm tones. I feel like it makes me think about my look a little bit more. And then this shade down here, it's called Pinkaberry. This is like a really intense duochrome shade. I don't know if you can see it, but it goes from like pink to green to gold to like just amazingness. And it almost feels like a Super Shock eyeshadow, like it's a little bit squishy. So yeah, I have just absolutely loved pulling this out. I think I'm going to do like a 2 looks 1 palette with this just because I just have enjoyed it so much. And, you know, like I said, I want to shout out this brand that's from my hometown. Now, in saying that, I'm going to tell you, I did buy this and this by myself. Like, this person, this brand does not even know that I exist. I just think it's really fun. But I just want to throw that out there now. My blanket keeps getting messed up. Okay, so let's do Oden's Eye next. I picked up both of these during their Black Friday sale. I did their mystery box like in the springtime and got the Alwa palette, the first one, the fairy palette, and it's more of a like cool toned purpley palette. I just didn't really, the shimmer formula I liked in that one, but the matte formula, I always found it a little bit hard to work with. So I passed that palette on to Laura, and I hope that she's loving it. But I wanted to give Oden's Eye another try, and honestly, that Alwa palette is not the palette that I would have picked for myself, but that's the fun of a mystery box, right? So during their Black Friday sale, I actually picked up the 2 palettes that I would have wanted. So the first one is the Solmana palette, the Sun and Moon palette. I love this. The matte formula in here is so nice and easy to work with. I don't find any patchiness, and I feel like what you see in the pan is what you get on your eyes, which is very nice. This shade down here, I know everyone says like, oh, this is my favorite shade. And I would love to tell you that I have a different favorite shade so that I could be different, but I don't. I think we're all expecting this to be Haley's favorite shade, and it is Haley's favorite shade. Pairing this with the like periwinkle blue kind of shade, if I could figure out where to put my fingers, pairing these two together has been really fun, just simple eye look, and I've absolutely fallen in love with this brand even more than I did. And then I picked up the Norns eyeshadow palette. So I love the like dark and richness of this palette. I will say though that some of these shimmers, some of these mattes, like this one in particular, looks like a really nice dark purple, but you really do have to work and build this one up. So this, so far that I've used out of here, this is the only one that's kind of a letdown, but the shimmer formula of Oden's Eye is just so pretty and so nice to work with. I absolutely love this shade down here. It's, again, one of those like duochrome shades where it goes from like blue to purple. I don't know if I can get that to like pick up on camera, but yeah, definitely do enjoy this palette and reaching for it. I think this is a fun like winter palette for me in my collection. So that's my two Oden's Eyes palette. All right, so let's do these two next because I'm kind of like, oh, do I show these on camera or do I not? But I want to be like honest with you guys so we can all see what palettes these are and who they're from. I did not purchase these. So again, my cousin, the one that I've referenced that gave me like the Good Sport palette and things like that, she did the J-Star mystery boxes and she got these palettes in them. And so I think she had said that she had planned on like selling them, but then like when the events of September happened, she reached out to me and she was like, hey, you know, I know you're going through a hard time and I just want to do something nice for you. So I have these two palettes. I really think you would like them. And she's quite aware of like his controversy, you know, but that's her own business where she wants to put her money. So my long-winded thing that I'm trying to get at is I don't see these as his palettes. I see these as my, like a very sweet and thoughtful gift from my cousin when I was going through like a very rough time. So that is how I'm going to view these and use these. Probably won't feature them like on my channel per se, but I do want you to know that I do have them and I do plan on using them because again, I see them as, you know, palettes from my cousin. This is, to me, these are like a sign of love. Like it just warmed my heart that someone, you know, wanted to reach out and essentially like put together like a little care package for me. So yeah, this is the Thirsty palette. This one is really pretty. I have not yet dipped into either one of these to be quite honest, but the color stories of them are really nice and she swears that his formula is amazing and that I'm gonna love it. So I really think I will get a lot of use out of this Thirsty palette in the summertime. And then this is the Mini Controversy one. Honestly, the color story of this one speaks to me a little bit more. Again, it's just an interesting mashup of colors that I wouldn't have put together personally. So it makes my brain do a little bit of thinking and I can appreciate that. So those are my two, like, I don't know, I hate to call them dirty little secrets because they're not, because like I said, I don't see them as his palettes. I see these as like a very sweet and thoughtful gift, and that is how I'm going to choose to look at them and love on them. So there's that. Oh, we are getting to the end, guys. I promise 2 more brands. Okay, so Natasha Denona, I have the Mini Xenon palette, which looks like this. I picked this up because I really wanted a palette that had a really good black. I actually have, during my hiatus, learned to really enjoy black eyeshadows and use them to deepen up looks. And then I really wanted like this dark gray, this like silver shimmer shade wasn't one of the reasons I got the palette, but then this light gray and this like off-white matte shade. This to me is my perfect like companion palette. Well, maybe not perfect, but I did see this as like a companion palette to get this and really help me take some of those lighter palettes I have in my collection that don't go super dark and make them work in the way that I want to. I have dipped into this twice in its life since I've had it and done just like solo looks from this, so I do enjoy it in that way too. But obviously if you dip into just this palette alone, you're getting a very intense like smoky eye, so I don't do that quite often. This is more of like a companion palette. And then I was unsure of like the outside of some of these is so reflective, so I'm not gonna like blind you. I'm just gonna hold them like this. I was unsure whether to like show this one because it has face products and eye products, but I do want like the full representation. So this is the Glam Face Palette. I did pick up the dark version. Let me open it for you. So this is what this looks like. Those top two products, the ring light is just going to catch it. Okay, so the top two are a cream blush and a cream highlighter, and then you can see we have 5 eyeshadows. So much like the mini Xenon palette, I do use this from time to time to create a full look, and I think that it's really pretty doing it that way. There's 3 mattes and 2 shimmers, but I see this more as my like chocolate brown version of the mini Xenon. So whereas this palette is like more cool toned and black gray, this is more warm tone and brown, and it's going to help me, you know, deepen up those like more warm tone palettes that I have. And then also I was just super curious to try her cream powder or cream blush and cream highlighter formula. This was probably the bigger draw to this palette for me, but I've gotten a lot of use out of the face products and the eyeshadow, so I'm quite happy that I do have this in my collection. Okay, so then I have the Natasha Denona Retro palette, which is right here. This was a gift from my husband for our anniversary, and this, I feel like I would have told you the Metropolis was my favorite, but I don't know. This one might be dethroning him. I do feel like a lot of people would look at this and call this a monochromatic palette. I do agree with you, but I feel like you get a lot of like interesting looks with this. Now I will say, don't, you know, unless you're like really into her formula or things like that. I do know ColourPop came out with the Orchid You Not, which does look very similar to this. So, you know, go with the cheaper version. That's always going to be my advice in most cases. But I do really love her formula. I love her cream to powder formula. And I have absolutely just enjoyed coming into this palette and playing around with it. I know some people said that this center shade, I think it's called Psychedelic, was one of their least favorite shades. So what I saw was people trying to use this as like a straight on shimmer shade, but it's a topper shade. So I will either take my finger and tap this over any of these other shadows, and I really enjoy it that way, or I will use either the NYX glitter glue or a colored base from P. Louise, put that down and then put this over it, and that really makes it come through as like a light pinky kind of shimmer shade, and it's really pretty that way. But yeah, this is the Retro palette. And then I wasn't going to get this one, but it was on sale for half off, and then it sold out, and I was like, see, Haley, you didn't need it. But then it came back to Sephora and it was still half off, so I got it. But this is the Love palette from Natasha Denona, and I'm not mad that I have this. I do enjoy this one. However, I feel like I like the other 2 MIDI palettes that I have, so the Retro and then the next one. I feel like I like those just a little bit better, and I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it because, again, the formula in here is still really great. This does have some of her cream to powder shades, and this is a really nice like pinky purple palette. I'm never upset with the looks that I do, but I think part of it might be that just this color story is a little like overdone. Like I feel like we've seen this color story, so maybe that's why I'm like, oh, this, I like it, but it's not like my favorite. Like I'm glad that I got this for half off and didn't like buy it when it was full price. So, but yeah, this one exists in my collection as well. All right, so the last MIDI palette that I have from her is the Zendo palette. I feel like this palette got a lot of flack, and I don't know why. I really love this. I will say, I think it was Alejandra Lisette, or Alex, as you guys maybe know her. I will try, if it is her, I will link her videos and stuff in the description box. But she did kind of like a review on this palette, and one thing that she said that I really think a lot of people miss the mark on is that this is the Zendo palette. Like this is the like zen or like calming palette. So a lot of these shimmers are not going to be like bright and punchy. It is more of like a muted color and a muted color story, because that was like the big complaint, like that the shimmers weren't that impactful and things like that. So I feel like that was one reason why this got like such a bad like kind of review, was just people were expecting something else, which is still fair. Like I understand that, but I think when you understand like the thought process behind the palette, you understand why these are more muted. Either way, though, I really do enjoy this. I will say my favorite look to do is surprisingly an all matte look with this palette. So I go in first with this army green shade here, and then I deepen it up with this top green shade, and then all over my lid I put this minty green shade. It is so pretty. That has been my favorite thing to do with this palette, as you know, shocking as that may seem, because I'm usually all about my shimmers, and I do also enjoy mixing those more cooler, like earthy tones with the warmer tones. So yeah, I am super happy to play around with this palette more and get a lot of good use out of it. All right, so the last Natasha Denona that I have is the Metropolis palette. So I think this was their holiday release for 2019. I think this has finally been discontinued. I really love this palette. I was torn between getting this and the bigger green brown palette, but I ultimately went with this one because I like the tones of green in this palette more, and I feel like this palette had more variety than what the green brown palette could offer me. Now obviously you can see a lot of use on this part of the palette, I feel like, and not a whole lot of use on this last 3 columns. So I'm going to push myself this year, especially in the summer, because this is very warm tone orangey red over here. I'm going to push myself more in the summer to exclusively use like this side of the palette and see like what kind of damage I can do to it. So I do want this palette to look more used and loved throughout the year, because this is like my most expensive palette, but I do really enjoy it. Okay, I feel like I've been filming for a little too long and need a break, but we've got one brand left. So, okay. Kaleidos. Let's get into this. I absolutely love Kaleidos. I don't know if I could tell you what my favorite indie brand is, but Kaleidos does make some of my favorite indie palettes. So we'll first do the Futurism palettes. I only have 4 of them. So I have the Sci-Fi Green, the Futurism 1, which I think this one has been discontinued. I'm trying to like... So the one thing that I don't like about their Futurism palettes is that all of the names of the shades are on this like plasticky insert. They're not like actually on the palette, so you kind of have to, if you want to know the shade names, you'd have to keep that. But this is what the inside of the Sci-Fi Green looks like. This is just a really great grungy fall green, you know, palette. I think this might be the whole reason that I love grungy army kind of khaki greens as much as I do. I just feel like this is a really nicely done 6-pan palette. I feel like you can get a lot of variety of looks out of this, and these 2 shimmer shades are absolutely so pretty. This more like golden one, and then this more like, I feel like this is just a shimmer version of these 2 matte shades. So I really do enjoy this. I don't know why Kaleidos decided to like, you know, get rid of this palette. I think this was probably one of their most popular Futurism. Actually, you know what? I do know why they probably wanted to get rid of this and some of their other ones. I feel like their new Flower Punk palette is just a combination of some of these Futurism palettes. Don't argue, because you know I'm right. You know I'm right. All right, so then next is the Futurism 3, the Astro Pink palette. Again, I got to take out my little plasticky sleeve here. This is what this one looks like. This might be my favorite Futurism palette. I feel like this was just so pretty, and it is more, I won't say this is their most neutral one, because now that they have Sashimi City, I always get tongue-tied on that. Now that they have that one, I feel like that's their most neutral one, but before that palette came out, I feel like this was their most neutral one. But I do still really enjoy this. On camera, it comes off very like white, but this is a very light, like taupey lilac shimmer shade. It is so unique within my collection, and I actually do really love that shade. All right, so then up next is the Futurism 5, the Electro Turquoise, or the Taco Bell palette, and that's what we've all decided to call it. I think this one is still available. I know Astro Pink is still available as well, and I think this one is too. So I will open this up. This is probably my least favorite Futurism palette, if I'm going to be honest with you. And it's not the formula, it's not anything like that. Kaleidos makes a really nice formula. It is just that with this palette, this orange really throws me off, because if I use this orange with any of these other mattes, like if I use it with the blue mattes, it becomes green. And then if I use it with that brown on the very end, it becomes like kind of muddy. So I really see this more as like a companion palette. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I have definitely, like within this year, gotten more used to using palettes like together in conjunction with each other. But I do still like for all of my palettes to have that like, you know, like standalone value to them. So I would say this is my least favorite, but the two shimmer shades in here are just out of this world. Like this blue is a shifty blue shade. It actually kind of has like some gold and silver reflex in it. And then this shockwave shade down here is a really pretty like inner corner highlight. All right, so the last Futurism palette that I have is Futurism 6, the Lunar Lavender. So this and Sashimi City came out together in the fall of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And I feel like they were trying to maybe do like a more approachable, more like mainstream, neutral type palettes. I feel like, again, Sashimi City is the most neutral, but I could see why they like added this one to their collection. I feel like this would draw in a lot of people's attention, and obviously it drew in mine. I do own it. I really like the cool tone purples in here, and then this shade right here is again one of those like shifty duochrome shades. I think for you guys it comes up very blue on camera, but for me, when I look down at the palette, I see a lot of the purple come through. So it's a really pretty like standalone shade, but it's also a great topper shade. And then I guess without really thinking about it, I saved the best for last. So this is the collaboration palette that they did with Angelica Nyqvist here on YouTube. And this is the Club Nebula palette. So this palette did come out in January of 2021. This is what it looks like. It is a year old. I cannot get over the color story of this palette. I have to credit this palette and Angelica Nyqvist to my like wanting to explore and play around with color. Like I really feel like without discovering her, I would still be very like just want to wear neutrals and not really experiment. So I am thankful like for that to like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I am glad that I've like found that and like found a way to like explore and really play around with color is what I'm getting at. And I'm not knocking neutrals. I'm not knocking you if all you want to wear is neutrals. I'm just saying, like, for me, I am glad that I am playing around with color. When I first ordered this palette, I did have a little bit of buyer's remorse because, like I said, I was only doing like mainly neutral looks, and this is obviously a very dark, colorful like palette, but I have just gotten so much use out of this. I think you can tell because I have two pans in here. These like shimmer shades in here, this one, and then this one down here. These are all like more on that transformative side. So depending on what you pair these with, it'll like affect the color. So especially this one, it's like a kind of light purple in the pan. It's called You're My Only Hope. If you put this with some more blue shades, it definitely comes across as a more blue color. If you pair it with more pinks, it comes across more pinks. If you pair it with purples, it obviously pulls more purple. And then the same with like this one. It's a white with like a blue shift to it. And again, just depending on what you pair it with, it like really transforms and changes that color. So I think this is a fun palette to play with when you don't know what you really want. I feel like it pushes you out of your comfort zone, and it's almost like a fun game of like, well, what am I going to end up with if I pair this with, you know, this type of color or with this type of color. So, but yeah, that is it. That rounds off and finishes out my palette collection. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. I know it was very long. Hopefully having the chapters helped. But yeah, I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!